Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri is celebrating the 80th anniversary of Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech that defined the start of the Cold War. Our Missouri Capitol reporter Hannah Falcon spoke with political leaders about the relevance of the words that he spoke and what it means today.
80 years ago, Winston Churchill delivered his Iron Curtain speech here in Fulton, Missouri. Now today, political leaders are discussing what lessons we can take from Churchill. Honoring the wisdom delivered on this campus 8 decades ago, Missouri Governor Kehoe draws a connection from Churchill's call to stand up to Russia to today's conflict between the United States and Iran.
If history has taught us anything, it's that bad actors and hostile regimes will arise. But their ability to maintain the power necessary to destabilize the world's harmony rests squarely on the shoulders of our great nation and our allies.
What can our world leaders learn from Churchill and his Iron Curtain speech 80 years ago?
Our freedom was built on peace through strength. And I think you're seeing that happen on the global stage right now. Many of our allies have come together to make sure that we don't have a nation that literally has been under totalitarianism rule since 1979 have access to the weapons that they do.
Joining the weekend-long celebration are United States and United Kingdom ambassadors of past and present. Ken Adelman, who was an ambassador for the Reagan administration, is concerned the current administration is not taking Churchill's message to heart.
People who believe in freedom, who believe in the democratic way, who believe in decency, we should support those people and not be enamored with the Putins of the day who believe in none of that stuff.
Westminster College is recognizing this speech with events all weekend and has the first draft of Churchill's speech on display. Reporting in Fulton, I'm Hannah Falcon, WGEM News.